Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into what has to be one of the most incredibly demanding, high-stakes leadership positions in all of global marine governance. We're talking about the UNEP Senior Coordination Officer role for the Nairobi Convention Secretariat. Now, this is a heavy-hitting P5-level role based out of Nairobi, and by decoding this single job description, we actually get a fascinating behind-the-scenes look at the massive bureaucratic machinery required to save our oceans. We're going to break down the monumental expectations, the incredibly strict requirements, and the hidden realities of this position using the exact institutional framework provided. Let's get into it.
Think of this as your ultimate candidate briefing packet. Here's our roadmap. First up, the Ultimate Balancing Act. Second, navigating the institutional architecture. Third, the hard experience requirements. Fourth, a monumental daily workload. Fifth, the contractual catch. And finally, winning the role.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the Ultimate Balancing Act, wearing two hats.
So, the very first thing you need to wrap your head around with this P5 coordinator position is the intense core tension built directly into the job description. The person in this role is essentially expected to wear two totally different hats, and you have to operate at the absolute highest levels in both. On one hand, you've got treaty administration. This is the rigid, procedurally bound world of intergovernmental agreements. You're acting as the chief administrative officer of a formal treaty secretariat, convening conferences of the parties, transmitting formal legal notifications, and providing scrupulously neutral service to the contracting parties of the Western Indian Ocean. But at the exact same time, you've got to be a regional program manager. This means being an entrepreneurial, relationship-driven leader overseeing massive multi-donor engagements and global environment facility projects. Moving fluidly between these two incredibly distinct worlds? Well, that's the true test of this role.
Moving right along to Section 2, navigating the institutional architecture, the dual accountability.
You see, you aren't just juggling tasks here. You are juggling entirely different institutional bosses within the Global Regional Seas Program, which, by the way, currently spans 146 countries worldwide. Internally, as a UNEP staff member, the coordinator reports directly to the chief of the Regional Seas Branch over in the Ecosystems Division. So you have to follow all the internal UN management and administrative rules. But externally, as the designated secretariat, you answer formally and legally to the Nairobi Convention contracting parties. You serve these governments collectively. And, just to add one more layer of complexity, your work also has to align with the broader directives of the UN Environment Assembly. Navigating those tricky situations where internal management preferences might actually clash with the contracting parties' expectations? Yeah, that requires some serious diplomatic finesse.
Which brings us to Section 3, the hard experience requirements. And trust me, the numbers here absolutely do not lie.
So, who can actually apply for this? Let's look at the hard, non-negotiable prerequisites. 10. The absolute foundational requirement is a minimum of 10 years of progressively responsible professional experience, specifically in the planning, implementation, and management of marine and coastal programs. And the guidelines are crystal clear on this. It can't just be general environmental management where you did a little bit of coastal work on the side. You need a clear, proven upward trajectory in marine and coastal work at the national, regional, or international level.
Next up, 5. On top of those 10 years of programmatic work, you've got to have at least 5 years of experience directly in intergovernmental processes. This means you've been in the trenches supporting complex negotiations, managing governing bodies, and running those big conferences of the parties. You have to know the procedural and diplomatic norms of international treaty making inside and out.
Another 5. You also need 5 years specifically managing large marine environment programs and projects. The source explicitly highlights the need for experience with massive, multi-partner initiatives. They are particularly looking for experience with Global Environment Facility, or GF, funded projects, because those come with their own incredibly intense operational and technical challenges.
And finally, 3. You need 3 years of dedicated, hands-on experience in resource mobilization and fundraising strategy. Because as we're going to see in just a minute, securing funding isn't just a side hustle in this role. It is literally tied to the very survival of the Secretariat's programs.
Beyond those pretty staggering experience numbers, the educational bar is just as high. You need an advanced degree in environmental management, law, biology, or natural sciences. It's actually really interesting that environmental law is explicitly mentioned. It perfectly reflects the treaty administration side of the job we talked about. You also absolutely must be fluent in English at UN level 2. And here's a really fascinating detail. Experience in data analytics or data science is highly desirable. They want a leader who can drive true data-informed planning for the entire region. So in short, they are basically looking for a unicorn, a scientist, a lawyer, a diplomat, and a data whiz, all rolled into one.
All right, Section 4, a monumental daily workload, featuring 20-plus statutory functions.
Okay, let's say you actually meet all those staggering requirements. What does your day-to-day actually look like? The official terms of reference lists a monumental workload spanning over 20 distinct functions. On the treaty side, you're handling everything from preparing the massive logistics and substantive documents for those conferences of the parties, to legally transacting notifications, to supporting national focal points. Meanwhile, on the program side, you're evaluating comprehensive gender mainstreaming across all policies. You're leading remote field missions, and you're guiding external consultants. You aren't just managing from a desk somewhere. You are actively orchestrating marine governance across the entire Western Indian Ocean.
Let's decode a very specific piece of UN jargon that falls right smack in the middle of your workload: the clearinghouse mechanism. As the coordinator, you are responsible for supervising this vital regional data hub. Basically, it's an information management model used to efficiently collect, store, and share technical and scientific data with all the contracting parties, researchers, and stakeholders. This ties directly back to why that data analytics experience we just mentioned is so highly prized for this role.
And then you have the East African Trust Fund. This is the crucial financial mechanism where the contracting governments themselves provide the core funding for the Secretariat. As the coordinator, part of your job is the highly diplomatic but very firm task of making sure these governments actually pay their required financial contributions according to the rules. You are the ultimate steward of the Secretariat's financial viability, which, as you can imagine, requires a very delicate balance of high-level diplomacy and, well, debt collection.
Now for Section 5, the contractual catch, the reality of the role. Okay, so you have the 10 years of experience, you can run a cop in your sleep, and you manage massive Jeff projects. You get the job. But I really want you to ask yourself, looking at all this prestige and immense responsibility, what could possibly be the hidden trap for such a senior P5-level UN leadership role?
The answer is buried in the bureaucratic jargon FTA Limited. In plain English, this translates to a project-funded, fixed-term appointment. Despite the massive institutional significance of this role, it is fundamentally dependent on external funding. If the funding dries up or the mandate isn't renewed, the position is discontinued, which results in separation from service.
The source document spells it out point blank. Renewal of the appointment is contingent upon the continued existence of the mandate and availability of funding. The initial term for this role, it's just 1 single year. Think about that. During your very first year, while you're frantically trying to build relationships with governments and run international treaties, you also have to actively fundraise to ensure your own job survival alongside the broader sustainability of the Secretariat itself. Remember that mandatory 3 years of resource mobilization experience? Yeah, this is exactly why it's there.
Let's wrap up with Section 6, winning the role, the application roadmap.
So how do you actually secure this seemingly impossible job? Let's get into some actionable advice for navigating the rigorous UN selection process for this specific post. You're going to be evaluated against a strict 5-part competency framework: professionalism, teamwork, planning and organizing, leadership, and judgment/decision-making. And I want to highlight something really fascinating under the leadership criteria. The framework specifically looks for candidates who can demonstrate the courage to take unpopular stands. They literally do not want a yes person. They want a leader who isn't afraid to ruffle feathers, navigate complex diplomatic conflicts, and drive necessary, sometimes difficult change in marine governance. You're going to need very specific, concrete examples of this from your past experience.
The application roadmap itself is incredibly strict. Step 1, you submit your application through the UN's Inspira system. You must explicitly map your experience to those 10, 5, and 3-year thresholds we discussed. And a major warning here: Inspira applications absolutely cannot be edited or modified once submitted. No takebacks. Step 2 is passing a substantive assessment, which the guide notes is highly likely to be a heavy, technical case study testing your programmatic and diplomatic judgment. And finally, Step 3 is acing the competency-based interview, drawing on those specific examples we just talked about.
There is also a crucial heads up for any current internal UN staff considering this role. Under Staff Rule 4.10, if you are selected, you face reassignment or transfer without a lien to your parent position. In simple terms, you lose the automatic right to return to your previous UN job. You are taking a very real risk to step into this FTA limited, funding-dependent role. It requires clear-eyed realism about your own career trajectory.
We've unpacked the dual identity of this role: the staggering 10-plus years of highly specialized experience required,
the sheer volume of treaty and program duties, and the intense funding contingent reality of the contract itself. It is a job that demands a scientist, a diplomat, a program manager, and a hardcore fundraiser all rolled into one. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Looking at the monumental responsibilities of the Nairobi Convention Coordinator, do you have what it takes to master the ultimate balancing act of global marine governance? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.